do? Leave your answer as a fraction. Yeah, fractions are okay. We don't love them, right? But we work with fractions every day, especially in terms of equations, especially in terms of slope. And that's usually where you get your fraction, and that's okay. So today we're talking about parallel and perpendicular lines. And this was the part of our NC check-in where we did the absolute worst. I would say that we just really forgot about the specific rules about slopes for parallel and perpendicular lines. So we know that parallel lines have the same slope. And I'm going to just put a little m in a parenthesis because I want you to remember that slope is represented by the letter m in y equals mx plus b. Thank you, ma'am. And they have different what? Yeah, different y-intercepts. Different y-intercepts. Just close the door for me. Thank you. And that's going to get a little b. Different y-intercepts. Okay. What about perpendicular lines? What kind of slopes do they have? Different. How are they different? They're reciprocals of each other. So I'm going to put the word reciprocal right here. But there's something else different about them. Perpendicular lines change direction, right? So they're opposite. So they have opposite reciprocal slopes. So let's see. When I say opposite, that means that I'm changing the sign, plus or minus, right? That's what opposite means. That's referring to the sign, the plus or the minus. Reciprocal is referring to the fraction, right? So I'm just going to write flip fraction. Reciprocal means that you flip the fraction. Okay. Something that's helpful is this right here. It says this means that the product of the slopes of two perpendicular lines is, let's see, if I had a line that had a slope of 3 perpendicular to a line with a slope of negative 1/3, let's see, that's opposite. If this is positive 3, the opposite of that would be negative, and the reciprocal of 3 over 1 is 1/3. So if I take the product of these two numbers, what do I get? When I take the product of the slopes, what do I get? Someone use your calculator and do that. What is 3 times negative 1/3? Yeah, it's equal to negative 1. And this is always, it's always like that. So if you have two equations written in slope-intercept form, you can just grab the slopes and multiply them together to know if they're perpendicular, if you don't recognize or you don't remember the rule, okay? So forms of equations. This is our most common form. We write most of our linear equations in y equals mx plus b. Remember that m is your slope and b is your y-intercept. We sometimes write equations in standard form, especially when we're solving systems, right? We're solving systems. Just remember that A, B, and C are integers. They're not decimals. They're integers. And A cannot equal 0. Let's see. Let me rewrite that. A and B cannot both equal 0. A and B cannot both equal 0, meaning that A can be 0 or B can be 0, but they both can't be 0, right? If I have A equals 0, that means I don't really have an X. 0 times X is 0. That just means I'm going to have Y equals some number, which is a horizontal line. If B equals 0, that means I don't have the Y term. That means I'm going to have X equals some number, which is a vertical line. Very good. Okay. And then point slope form, which some of your equations, I made sure that the warm up that you did today, I gave some of your equations in point slope form. Point slope form is, to me, probably the easiest method to use because M stands for the slope. And then this X sub 1, Y sub 1 is just any ordered pair that the line passes through. It's just any ordered pair that the line goes through. So I'm put any ordered pair on the line. So it's pretty easy to write an equation if you know the slope and just one point that it passes through. It's probably the easiest method. Most often we write them in slope intercept form. And I see just now that says slop. That's what happens when I type really late at night. Sorry about that, guys. Okay. So again, these are screenshots, or these are the single questions from your Delta Math assignment. So the first one just says find the slope of a line that's perpendicular to the line that has this equation. So first, we need to find the slope for 2x plus 3y equals 21. How are we going to do that? How are we going to find the slope for that? Yeah, we're going to put it in slope intercept form. If we had Desmos up right now, could we just graph that? Couldn't we just graph that equation? Yeah. So I'm going to write a little note that says Desmos graph and count your slope. But because I don't have Desmos pulled up, I want to just kind of review with you. So I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. So I have 3y equals a negative 2x plus 21. Now what do I have to do? I'm trying to get y all by itself. Yeah, you divide by 3, and you have to divide every stinking term, right? Everything gets divided by 3. So y equals negative 2 divided by 3 gives me a repeating decimal of negative 0.6, right? So I'm just going to leave that as a fraction, negative 2/3 x plus 7. What I'm looking for is this value right here. I need to know the slope. So the slope of my given line is negative 2/3. I need to write an equation or find the slope to a line that's going to be perpendicular to that. So what do we know about perpendicular slopes? So the opposite of negative 2/3 is positive, and the reciprocal is, there you go. So positive 3/2. Positive 3/2 is the slope that we're looking for. Okay. Lorenzo, grab a copy of those notes right there, and I'll just make sure you get some filled out ones too. It says parallel and perpendicular lines. Okay, next one. This one says find the slope of a line that's parallel to this line. So parallel means that it's going to have the same slope. So first, I have to find the slope of the given line. So find the slope of 3x plus 3y equals negative 36. What do you want to do first, Ashton? Yeah, subtract 3x from both sides. Sounds good. Subtract 3x, subtract 3x. Notice that when I do that, I put the x term first on the right side. I just write negative 3x minus 36. Will you guys close that door all the way, please, and thank you. I think you're the last. So what am I going to do next? Brayden, what am I going to do next? Oh, they're up front by that green crate. Will we grab one for Zan? I got one. Okay. What do you want to do, Brayden? Sorry. Yeah, divide every single term by 3. So y equals, let's see, a negative 3 divided by a positive 3 is a negative 1. x. Negative 36 divided by 3 is negative 12. So the slope of this line is negative 1. The slope of the parallel line, and the symbol that we use for parallel is just two lines together. This means parallel. So I write it like this. My parallel slope also has to equal negative 1 because we know that parallel lines have the same slope. Parallel lines have the same slope. Can we go on to the next one? Yes, absolutely. You good? Lorenzo, you got this one? I'll make sure you guys get a copy of filled out notes too, just so you can fill out what you missed. So this next one says graph a line that's parallel. What do we know about parallel lines? Same slope, different y-intercept. That's what we're looking for. So we're going to graph any line that's parallel to the given line. Okay. So what is the slope of the given line? Yeah, the slope of the given line, up 1 over 1. So the slope of my, and what's the y-intercept of the given line? Negative 1. Okay. So the parallel line that we need to graph can have what kind of slope? If it's parallel, what kind of slope does it need to have? M equals what? M equals 1. What y-intercept can it be? Any number that's not equal to negative 1, right? Yeah, just b can't equal negative 1. That's the only specification. So I'm going to just start at 6. I'm going to go up 1 to the right 1. You guys can use whatever y-intercept you want. So this would have the equation y equals 1x plus 6. What if I wanted to draw my line like below towards it, giving it like a negative y-intercept? Okay, well, what if I put it right here at negative 5? Still going to have a slope of 1. So this line right here is also parallel. This is the equation y equals 1x minus 5. So when you do that question in Delta Math, there are multiple answers, right? Multiple answers. You just need to make sure that you find the right slope. Does that make sense? All right, I'm going to go on to the next one. So this one says, graph a line that's perpendicular to the given line. Perpendicular to the given line. Okay, well, what does that mean? That means first I need to find the slope of the given line. Well, what is the slope of my given line? What do you think the slope is, Tiana? How much do I go down? How much do I go over? How much do I go down? How much do I run to the right? How much do I go down? How much do I run to the right? It doesn't matter where I pick. Negative 2 over 2.
Good morning, Patriots. At this time, our survey has been completed and students should be back in class. Thank you.
If I use this little chunk right here, it's negative 3 over 3. But what does that mean? That just means that my slope is what? Your slope is negative 1. Okay. So if I have a line given that has a slope of -1, what's its perpendicular slope going to look like? Well, what's the opposite of a negative? A positive. And what's the reciprocal of 1? Let's see. What is the reciprocal of the number 1? When I take that fraction and I flip it, what do I get? I still get 1. Yeah, the reciprocal of 1 is 1. So I'm just looking for, I need to just graph some line that has a slope of +1. So I'm going to cross my y-axis right here at 5. I'm going to draw a slope of +1, up 1 over 1. So this would be the equation y equals 1x plus 5. I know that they're perpendicular to each other, and I can draw that little right angle right there in between them to show that they're perpendicular. Do you guys remember that perpendicular lines form right angles? Do you remember that? Yeah, you learned that when we did, God bless you, when we did like shapes, we had to calculate like area of shapes on a coordinate grid, right? And so if we thought that they looked like a right triangle, we had to prove that they were a right triangle before we tried to figure out their area. Okay. So do you feel like you can graph a parallel line and a perpendicular line? Okay. Which equation represents a line that is perpendicular to this line? Y equals -8/3 x minus 1. So the slope that I have right now is what, Kaden? What's the slope of my given line? Say again. Yeah, -8/3. So Cameron, what is my perpendicular slope going to look like? What's the opposite of a negative? And what's the reciprocal of 8/3? Take the fraction and flip it. Yeah. So I'm looking for an equation that has a slope of 3/8. All right. All of these equations are written in some kind of like standard form. So let's write this equation in slope intercept and see if we can manipulate it. So let's say y equals 3/8 x plus some constant. I don't know what that is. I'm just going to call it the letter C. So we don't know what the y-intercept, it doesn't really matter. How would I get rid of the fraction coefficient? Because remember, if we put something in standard form, we can't have any fractions. So how do I get rid of that 3/8? Multiply both sides by 8. Excellent job, Violet. I'm going to multiply everything by 8. So let's see. 8 times y is 8y. 3/8 times 8, well, these cancel out, equals 3x. And 8 times my constant is just 8 times my constant. It's just that. Okay, so now what? I need to have the x and the y on the same side, right? So I'm going to subtract. I heard someone say it up there. Subtract 3x from both sides. So let's see. That gives me 8y minus 3x equals some number that's a multiple of 8. 8y minus 3x equals some number that's a multiple of 8. Do you guys see a match anywhere? Yeah, it's this one right here. It's this one right here. Okay. Who needs more time on that? Okay. Next one. Write the equation that represents a line that is parallel to x equals 0. What kind of a line is x equals 0? It's a vertical line, and it has undefined slope. Okay, so if I need to draw a vertical line with undefined slope, well, let's just kind of visualize it. Because again, you guys can use Desmos, right? So if I were to just draw an XY coordinate, the line x equals 0 is actually going to be right on the y-axis. Okay. If it's parallel to that, that means it has to be going in the exact same direction with the exact same slope, right? So let's see. Is that parallel to the blue line? Yeah. Is this parallel to the blue line? Yeah. I need any line that's written in the form x equals some number. There is no y in the equation. Do you see that choice? Say it again, Tana. Yeah, x equals -1. That could actually be this line right here. X equals -1. Okay. I don't know why, but it's sometimes really hard for us to think about parallel lines to a vertical or a horizontal because their slopes are weird, right? A slope of 0 or a slope undefined. So use Desmos, graph that, and then just find like any number. You can use any line. So you could graph x equals 0 and then plug every single one of those equations in and get the same thing. Okay. All right. Lines represented by the equation y equals -1/5 x plus 1 and by the equation y minus 5x equals -8 are what? Well, the first thing that I would do if I was given this question is I would probably put it into Desmos and I would graph it. I'm just going to sketch a graph really fast. So if I have the equation y equals -1/5 x plus 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I graph this line, I begin at 1, and then I go down 1 and to the right 5. I could go up 1 and to the left 5. This is my equation y equals -1/5 x plus 1. For this equation, I'm going to put it into Desmos, but in order for me to graph it, I just have to move that 5x to the other side. So I maybe need to add 6, 7, 8. I begin at -8 and I go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over 1. Up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over 1. This is y minus 5x equals -8. What do those lines look like? Do they look like they're parallel? Do they look like they're perpendicular? Do they look like they're neither? Do they look like they're the same line? Yeah, they look like they're perpendicular. Let's see, I could take the slope of the given line, the first one that I graphed, times the slope of the second one, and make sure that they're perpendicular because their products equal -1. Is that true? Is -1/5 times 5 -1? Yeah, it is. But remember, you have access to Desmos. Anytime you're asked to compare linear equations, graph it. Graph it. Don't rely on your algebra brain without using your visual brain, right? Because I think that we use both. So don't just think that you have to solve all these algebraically. You don't. Raise your hand if you need more time with that. All right. What is an equation of a line that passes through the point -8, -1, and is parallel to the line x minus 2y equals 18? So what do we need to do first? It's in standard form. We have to find the slope of this line. X minus 2y equals 18. What am I going to do first, Kimber? Trying to get y all by itself. Yeah, we're going to subtract x from both sides. So negative 2y equals negative x plus 18. Justice, what am I going to do next to get y all by itself? Yeah, I have to divide everything by negative 2. Everything gets divided by negative 2. Everything gets divided by negative 2. So I'm going to write this equation over here. So I'm left with the equation y equals, remember there's a 1 here. Negative 1 divided by negative 2 is a positive 1/2 x. 18 divided by negative 2 is a negative 9. So what is the slope of that line? Yeah, my slope is 1/2. What equation form did I show you before that just uses slope and an ordered pair? What's that called? It's called point slope form. Yeah, that just means that I can take, if I know the slope and any ordered pair, I can write it in point slope form. Y minus y1 equals my slope times x minus x sub 1. So let's see. If I label this x sub 1 and y sub 1, my equation is going to be y minus negative 1, so that's what my y1 coordinate is, equals my slope, which is what? 1/2 times x minus negative 8. And I'm just going to put this in a nicer form. Let's see, what happens when you have minus a negative? It makes a great big plus. So I have y plus 1 equals 1/2 times, I have another minus a negative, that becomes x plus 8. So this is written in point slope form. What if the directions ask you to put it in y-intercept form? What am I going to do then, Aiden? If the directions say put it in y-intercept form, what do I have to do? How am I going to get rid of that parenthesis on the right-hand side? Yeah, I'm going to have to distribute that 1/2 first. Y plus 1 equals 1/2 times x is 1/2 x, and 1/2 of 8 is 4. And then I'm just going to subtract 1 from both sides. So in slope intercept form, this is y equals 1/2 x plus 3. If you were to graph these two lines, two equations, you'd get the same line, right? They're the same line, just written two different ways. Same line, just written two different ways. Okay, let's look at our next one. So we have to write an equation for a line that passes through this point. I'm going to go ahead and label my points x1 and y1. Label my coordinates of my ordered pair. And it's perpendicular to this line. So Brian, I have to find the slope of this line first. How am I going to do that? Keep going, Brian. Minus 2x, and then what? I have negative y equals negative 2x plus 5. What do you want me to do next? Divide by negative 1. Divide by negative 1. So my equation is y equals a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So that gives me 2x. Positive 5 divided by negative 1 is negative 5. What is the slope of the line that we just solved for? 2. So its perpendicular slope is what? It's not negative 2. That just changes the sign. What is it, Uriah? What's the opposite reciprocal of the whole number 2? Nope, that's just the opposite. Remember, the slope 2 is the same thing as 2 over 1. Negative 1/2. Yeah. Negative 1/2. So we're just going to put this one in point slope form. So y minus my y1 coordinate is 5 equals negative 1/2 times x minus negative 8. Minus a negative is just going to be a positive, so I'm just going to write it like that. And I'm going to leave this one in point slope form. Last two examples are pretty straightforward. The equations for this next one are written in slope intercept form, and we are just given a point, and it says leave it in point slope form. So, Carla, we're finding the equation of a line that's perpendicular to this line right here. What's the slope of this line? Jansen, what's my perpendicular slope going to be? Opposite reciprocal. -2, good job. So we're going to write it in point slope form. This is my x sub 1 and my y sub 1. So write that equation for me, Ashton. Starts off with y. We're writing it in point slope form. Y minus y sub 1 equals m times the quantity x minus x sub 1. So these are the things that get changed out. This, and this. Those are the only things that get changed. So you start off with y minus, what's the y1 coordinate? Help them out, Gianna.
7.
Equals my slope, Gianna. My perpendicular slope is what?
-2.
Good job. No, don't apologize. -2 times the quantity.
X minus 1.
Good job. That is point slope form equation. That's it. Do you guys feel okay with that?
Yeah.
Because the equation form is x minus the x1 coordinate. Okay. So when we look at this one, so when we did this up here, we really had x minus -8. We know minus a negative becomes a positive. Does that make sense, Aiden? Okay. Last one, Violet. Parallel to this line. So what am I going to do to find the slope of this line? Yeah, subtract the 2x. What does that give me? Perfect. So what is my slope of this line? So what is the slope of the line that's parallel to this? Awesome. You feel like you can do the equation? I'm going to label this x sub 1 and y sub 1. You go, girl. Perfect. Outstanding.